Welcome to the Pack the House Show, where we have conversations about sharing your faith as you walk through life with others.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of Pack the House. My name is Andrew Osborne and I'm joined once again by Aaron Davis.
Hiya.
And Pastor Jason Tabor.
Great to be back with you.
And we are starting a new series here at the church
entitled.
Oh yeah, we started it this last week.
Started without us here on this podcast.
Listen, I'm the host here.
All right, sorry, sir.
So we are launching a new series entitled Launch, where we're getting back into the swing of life with the new school year and getting back to the fall kickoff kind of stuff.
Yes, it's cold today. It's fall.
And it is cold. It feels great outside.
Mm-hmm.
And part of kicking off is trying to get people back to church, whether that's people who have been around for a while or, as today we're going to talk about, bringing people who may not have ever been involved in church, bring them in. So Pastor Jason, I know you have some thoughts on this.
I don't know why you would assume that.
Yeah.
Just a few.
That doesn't sound like me.
No, it's not really your thing. So how would you go about looking for people who might be ready to come to church?
Yeah, so first thing to note in that, especially as we put this question before our audience, maybe you're listening or you're watching and someone comes to mind, right? Maybe someone that you love and care about, who may or may not have ever been part of the church before. The dynamic is really the same, whether they kind of left the church or they're brand new to it. Or maybe there's someone you're connected with, a friend, a coworker that you've been building a relationship with. And so the first thing we want, well, I'm going to say we, but Andrew invited me to talk. So the first thing that I want to put out there is, as we think about inviting someone to church, it's sometimes hard for us as a lot of us lifelong church people to maybe make this connection. But I like to talk about it like this. Imagine how you would feel if you were invited to attend prayers at a mosque. Yeah, Aaron's face says,
No, I would love it. I love learning about all those religions, though.
Okay, well, yeah.
I know I'm weird.
Well, you're not weird. That's not. You're not helping my point.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's okay. We didn't prep this part beforehand. But the point behind that is, for many of us, that would be maybe it would be an exciting experience. It'd be an interesting experience, but it would be pretty foreign to us.
Mm-hmm.
And so one thing to keep in mind with our unchurched or mostly our unchurched friends, is that it can be a similar kind of foreign, challenging, daunting experience or thought for them to consider worshiping with us. What that means is we don't want to rush it. I've been talking a lot. We don't want to rush it.
The thing that makes it feel so foreign to them is probably cultural, what's the word I'm looking for? Just ideas of what church is. So they see from TV shows or hear from stories people tell about the church is this way, and it freaks them out maybe. They see shows about cults and things like that, and they assume that all of us are like that.
Yep.
And so I think that's a hurdle we have to get over.
And going back to the analogy of like the mosque and stuff, right? Like I would be gung-ho, right? But again, I would have conceptions that there would be people in that mosque that would not want me there.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because I'm not, I'm not part of the Nation of Islam, right?
Yeah, you would certainly come with ideas of your own.
Right, exactly.
Some of which might be obstacles.
So I think that that's another thing that people are like, well, I know you're inviting me, but there's other people at this worship service that probably don't want me there. You know what I mean? So there's that too, where it's like you just have this conception that, you're not doing it right, essentially.
Yeah. So all of this is really the disclaimer before we talk about how to do this. If you have a person in your life and you're not sure if they're ready to be invited, it's okay to, even as we're encouraging it this week as a congregation, it's okay to not invite them if you're not sure about it. your presence with them, your relationship with them is really, really valuable.
Yeah.
And it's actually more important to cultivate and sustain that relationship than to invite them to church at this moment.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, I think your point of it takes a long time is a good one, that they may have preconceived ideas of what church is, but through that long building relationship that you have with them, maybe they see who you are and what you're about. And if you say that's what church, like my church is, I'm like my church.
Yeah, you get to be the church person that demonstrates what it's like.
Right.
Yeah.
And a lot of times sometimes it's like total superficial stuff. Like, what do I wear? You know what I mean? And I'm always like, whatever you want. Like, I mean, wear clothes. That's pretty much our only caveat, right? But I mean, there are those types of like, worldly things that they're thinking about in their brain before they come to church with you, you know?
Yep.
So.
So that is, though, a good segue of it actually fits more in point number 3 of how to make the invitation. But before we get there, let's talk about how to recognize a person who might be ready to have that invitation.
Okay, so
Yeah,
I have to say, personally, I'm really bad at that, only because like I don't do things the way other people do things, as we all know from this podcast.
Whatever
right?
do you mean?
So like random people that like, I mean, I've like hung out with a few times will ask me like, what are you doing on Sunday? And I'll be like, I'm going to church. You want to come? Like, it'll just be like, I mean, totally like non-confrontational, but it's like, that's what I'm doing, but I still want to hang out with you. So like, come along. Right. Like it
I think if
has
it,
nothing to do with the church, if that makes sense.
if it comes up naturally, I think, sure, there's no reason to hide it.
Right.
Go ahead and say, I'm going to church. That's fine.
Yeah. Right.
In my experience, it hasn't quite happened necessarily like that. It usually takes a little longer. And one of the things that I've noticed quite a bit is that people who are ready to be invited will sort of, quote unquote, tell me that by the questions that they ask. Does that sort of make sense?
Yeah.
Like asking you like what time service is or something like that?
Yeah. Sometimes it's very logistical. What time the service is, or you made the point earlier, like, what I wear.
Or it could be more about like, so what is your church actually like? Like what kind of music do you guys do there and stuff
Oh
like
yeah,
that?
that's a good thing.
Mm-hmm. And sometimes
Like-
it's not necessarily church related questions. It's just maybe a question that lets me know they're ready to go deeper. A friend of mine one time asked me, and it took 2 years to get to this point, to our previous point, 2 years. And he asked me, do you have a Bible that I could borrow, and where should I start reading it? So that doesn't necessarily say to me, at least in that question, that he is looking to be invited to church. But we know as Jesus followers, that's an important step. And so with a person like that, who's very clearly ready to go deeper, obviously I answered his question I gave in the Bible, but someone like that, it might also be an appropriate opportunity to say, really glad you're reading in scripture. One of the things that really helps me is to be gathered with other people as we study and learn this stuff together. So.
And as we were talking about earlier before the podcast started too, like I am more apt to invite people to my Bible study than I am to invite them to like actual worship service. So like the whole reason I started Bible study is because I'm a mom and I wanted an hour and a half where no one was touching me, right? And Cornerstone offered childcare during the Bible study. Legit, that is the only reason that I started Bible study.
Yeah, I just was having this conversation with a friend last night, who was talking about people who come to church just for the free food.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's fine, right?
Whatever.
In all sorts of ways.
So like if I meet a mom out in my life, I'm like, hey, we've got this Bible study and there's childcare. Like, I don't care if you want to study the Bible. You don't have to be with your kid for an hour and a half. It's amazing.
Yeah, and it's okay to,
ladies.
Yes.
It's okay to lean on the extras. It's okay to make an appealing invitation, right?
Right. But that's what I'm saying. Like, you don't have to be like, they're ready to go deeper.
Yeah.
Like, it can be superficial, like getting them into whatever it is. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Do you disagree?
So I don't disagree. I'm gonna make for you a point that you made earlier on before we recorded. Because I said that about a person who's ready to go deeper in reference to inviting them to a worship service.
Right.
You're kind of talking about a different person now, which is good. But worship would not be the place I would invite that person to.
Right.
You made the comment kind of about our social activities, our Oktoberfest or that kind of thing.
Mhm.
And your childcare example is the same, right?
Yeah.
There are other things that we do as a church family that might be better entry points, especially for the person who isn't yet signaling, I really want to go a lot deeper.
Right.
Yeah, that's kind of been my experience, like with my neighbors. I can easily get them to come to like a family event where there's going to be inflatables for kids and things like that, because they all have kids that would enjoy that, and that's an easy invite. But it gets them in the door and shows them this is what our church is like. These are what the people at our church are like, and it kind of takes away that tension of this place is so foreign to me that there's no way I could walk in there.
I've probably said this before too. When we have events like the family events with the bounce houses or Oktoberfest or whatever it is, as a congregation, as Cornerstone, we win if a neighbor or a friend walks away, not necessarily saying, I'm going to come to church here the next Sunday. But if they walk away saying, at Cornerstone, I met good people and I had a nice time. And if I need a church home, then I know where I can turn.
Right.
Because what I found to be true is that sooner or later, this is not what I found to be true, this is obvious to all of us, sooner or later, hardship will come. That family will experience some difficulty of some kind. And what I want is that they know in that moment, I could turn to Cornerstone.
Yeah.
So that might,
Yeah.
And I think too, like my husband's been to like Oktoberfest, right? And like I said before, he's an atheist. And he's like, when he goes to Oktoberfest, he's like, oh, Christians aren't weird and trying to convert me every 5 seconds,
Yeah.
right?
Well,
Because in his experience, yeah, some of us. But in his experience, like I'm the first one that he met that wasn't like aggressive, I guess is the right word for it. So like that's I mean, I'm aggressive, just not like evangelistically, I guess. But so like in his experience, like that's very comforting to him and like less off-putting, I should say.
right. And so right now in his life, Sunday worship is not a thing that he particularly wants.
No.
But if there comes a time when he does, what is great is that he knows he could turn to Cornerstone.
Yeah.
Another situation I've come across that kind of helped with getting my neighbors into church was their kids, my kids and their kids like to have sleepovers and to hang out. And we always tell them on Saturday night, well, you can spend the night, but on Sunday, we're going to wake up and go to church. Are you okay with that?
Mm-hmm.
And usually they're like, yeah, I'll go. And so we get the kids to come with us to church, and then they go home and talk about it with their family. And so the family asks us questions about it. So it kind of opens the door to the whole family if we can get even just one of the kids to come along. And then we've had one of the families came to Christmas Eve church with us just because their daughter had been coming, and then we were talking about going, and the daughter said she wanted to go, so we invited the whole family and they all came along. But I
Awesome.
think those bigger services where it's something out of the ordinary, it's a time when people are thinking about churchy kind of things like Christmas or Easter. It might be a good opportunity to invite someone.
Well, and it is bigger and out of the ordinary, but it's also an opportunity for me to try it out without having to make a big commitment.
Right.
That's really why this kickoff thing can be a valuable opportunity in the same way. It's a way to say to your friend or your neighbor, this Sunday we're doing something a little special. We're going to have a kind of an emphasis on welcoming families. Why don't you try that out? And what that conveys to them is not asking you to make a year list. It's not the gym membership, right? Not asking you to sign up for a 6-month commitment. Just try it out once.
Mhm.
It's special. It's different. I know it's special. It's different. You know that. I know that I'm not going to expect you to sign on for every week. And so you can safely try it out.
Right.
Yeah. I will say about the taking other people's kids to church, though, do make sure that you've cleared it with the parents.
Oh yeah, I wouldn't
I've
just
had
take the kid.
friends.
Oh,
I've had friends that have done that, and it just caused a really big rift. Like, don't.
This is good advice for taking other people's kids anywhere.
yeah. Don't ever take the kid unless the parent is okay with it.
Yeah, like the parent knows that you're taking the kid to church. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I'm saying I asked the parent if it's okay.
Yes. And be specific, because I've had friends where they're like, well, we have stuff on Sunday morning, and then they don't tell the parents, and then they take their kids to church. Like don't do that.
All right, so we're moving in this direction anyway. Great conversation about maybe other sort of entry points beyond Sunday worship, but for purposes of our goal this weekend, which, as I said, is inviting and welcoming families. And by the way, I say families, but if you know a single person or a couple without, without kids, a widow, whatever it might be, you can invite them and we will welcome them. For our purposes this weekend, the goal is to invite those who are ready to Sunday worship. So let's shift a little bit back in that direction, and let's assume for purposes of discussion that we're thinking about someone who is ready and is signaling that they're ready to be invited to Sunday worship. And how do we have that conversation?
Okay, so the first thing that I would say is that you want to set something, like if you do get somebody to say yes, right? You want to set it up to where they're the most comfortable. So you want to meet them outside the door, right? Or even like carpool with them, just so that they don't have those like anxiety feelings of going into a strange place all by themselves. Like you're supposed to be like their ambassador. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So I'll meet you. I'll unwind that just a bit. At the very least, tell them which door to go in.
Right.
Especially at a place like our Carmel site that has many, many doors.
Yes.
Tell them where.
But even meeting them like in the parking lot is more like putting people at ease. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, it can be. If that's feasible, if that works, great. All I want to be saying is don't exclude yourself because you can't meet them in the parking lot.
Oh yeah, no. But
Other ways to make that work. But your point is a great one of what thinking about it, the experience through the eyes of someone brand new. What questions would you have? What decision points would you encounter? And how can you sort of iron those things out ahead of time, so the person you are inviting has the easiest experience possible? So what door to go in is a great one. Aaron mentioned earlier, like what to wear. That's one that I own all the time. I have so much social anxiety around what to wear at given.
Really?
Yes, I know.
No, I didn't mean that to come off very.
For other people to eat at is my other one. But that's not relevant to this conversation.
Yeah.
But little things like that, again, many of us who've been a part of this for a long time, we might assume, well, that's not a question. Everybody knows that. But that means everybody who's already in the room. People who are brand new don't always know those things. More information is always better than less information. And so, if you feel silly telling them, you can go in door one. They're going to appreciate knowing that information.
Yeah. And even like, especially if you're like on the traditional side, like just explaining to them like how things go, right?
And by the way, that's going to be a part of our worship service this weekend, especially. We're going to be a little bit more intentional of explaining why we're doing what we're doing. So
right. And even like the communion, like you don't want them to feel pressure, like, like they can sit or communion, and like offering, like be like, this is not necessary, like just things like that would be like that's coming at them like a lot. And so putting them at ease in those big situations where you're required to do stuff in church.
Yeah, kind of being their advocate, their champion. Throughout the service as well. Big one if they have small kids. Kids are loud, and we have loud kids in our service all the time, and that's great.
Mine are always there.
Also, there's a cry room if you need that, et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
That sort of a thing. So those are kind of the logistical details. I want to talk a little bit higher level about how that conversation goes. And a piece of good news from research. I like reading research. One of the things that new believers and sort of those attending for the first time have said to researchers, to surveyors, is the biggest reason that they went to a Sunday worship service was because someone that they like and trust invited them.
Mhm.
What that means for us is we don't have to have perfect words or the right formula. If you've been building a relationship with a person, if they like you and they trust you, that goes a long way toward putting. You've already done the hardest part of the work. And that goes a long way toward helping them be favorable toward that invitation. So go into the conversation with that in mind. You've got a lot of the hardest work done.
And a lot of times they might be going to worship with you, but they really just might be wanting to hang out with you.
Could be.
Right? Like I've had that experience too, which I mean, that's fine. Let's hang out
Mm-hmm.
and worship God.
Yeah, and let's do it in a setting that I love.
Bonus.
That
Yeah,
works.
exactly.
Bonus. Other thing I would recommend is spend a little bit of time ahead thinking about why it's valuable for you. You know, really would love for you to come visit us this weekend or come to church with us this weekend. Not simply because our church is doing a visitor thing. You don't have to tell them that actually, but because I find value in it, right? It's helpful to me. It does something worthwhile for me. Through that, be able to share that a little bit and make that connection with your friend.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So once we get the invitation out there and we invite them along and we tell them all the reasons why they should come, what happens if they still say no? Then what?
Then you punch them in the face and drag them to church anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Ask them the next week.
Ask them the next week and the week after that and the week after that.
Okay, one of you say this serious answer now.
The serious answer is leave it alone. They're adults and they have not the memory of a goldfish, so they know that you've invited them to church and it is an open invitation and you don't need to keep harping on it.
Yeah, the serious answer before that is you win anyway. You win
That's
by making the invitation, not by the success of it.
That's true.
So if you've built the relationship and you've made the ask, congratulations, you did exactly what you have done your part in walking alongside with Jesus. He'll do the hard work of working within that person's heart to make them ready in his time.
Well, and just thinking about that too, how many times did Jesus invite people and they said no? You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, his numbers went down.
right, exactly. So it was like, I mean, if they're saying no to us, don't take it personally. I mean, people said no to Jesus.
Yep. Yeah.
Well, and even though we're saying don't harp on them and ask them a billion times, it doesn't mean you can't ever ask them again.
Right.
Like maybe wait a couple of months and say, hey, just wanted to check in and see if you're interested in going along. Or invite them to something different, like an evening activity or something like that.
Yeah, so exactly. We have a lot of stuff on our calendar coming up in the fall and winter season that make those sort of natural milestones where you could have that conversation again.
Right.
Also, I love our church. It's my favorite. But if somebody would be more comfortable going to a different style of church, like if you know that about them, go with them to that church. You know
Yeah,
what
I've
I
said
mean?
that a lot when we have visitors and we check in with them afterward. One of the things I always say is, really would be glad to have you at Cornerstone. I sincerely hope that you find that it fits. If not, definitely happy to have conversation about other places that might. So, and again, that's because the kingdom of God wins when that person is connected with a scriptural, faithful church. So we don't have to be territorial.
No.
Right.
No, especially that happens a lot for me because I live in Plainfield. So like to drive to Cornerstone, it's like 45 minutes. And it's like, there's a lot of people that are not willing to do that. But
Yeah,
I'm
maybe
happy
I'll try it out once because
Yeah.
you invited me where there's a special thing, but as a regular
Right.
basis, I might want one closer to home. And
But
that's
I'm happy to go around the corner and go to the church with you around the corner on a random Sunday.
Mhm.
Like I'll do that. I don't care, So
Right.
great. Well,
All
that
right.
seems like a good place to wrap things up.
I think so
Yeah,
too.
just to conclude, so the ideas of what you're talking about are look for people who are ready, and that you may know they're ready through the things they say to you or the questions they ask. You can recognize they're ready again through those conversations. And once you feel like they're ready for the invitation, then do your best to explain why you go and what you get out of it, and what help them ease their concerns by kind of talking through what your church is like and what they can expect and those kind of things. And if they say no, keep them in your prayers, and maybe it'll work down the road.
And you've done good work either way.
Yep.
Awesome.
Every
All right.
conversation about God is a win.
That's right. Aaron, as we finish out, would you mind praying for us?
Sure. Dear Father in heaven, thank you so much for giving us a beautiful community to worship with and to praise you with and to do all the things that bring us closer to you. Help us find people around us to help them connect to the body of Christ and to help even connect closer to you. Help us open our eyes to see those people that are searching for you and those people that you have softened their hearts and made them ready to take that step and go into a church with us. In our walk with you, help us walk with them. And in your name we pray. Amen.
Mhm.
Awesome. Well, thank you. And thank you all for joining us. Have a great week.
Bye.
Thanks for joining us for the Pack the House show. For more content like this, or to connect with us, visit our website, cornerstonelutheran.church.